when you're getting into the discussion around like tokenization and are people just bringing people on in order to check these boxes of like, yes, we have like one woman and we have one, Black person and one Latino person, then I think that we're getting into a space where people are filling things for filling the boxes possibly. But for our organization, because we do serve primarily Black and Latino families, like it's important to me that those specific racial and cultural identities are represented on our board of directors.
Welcome to the Race to Social Justice, a podcast that explores the myriad racial and social challenges facing the modern world, with your hosts, Kiva White and John Kepner. Thank you for being part of the courageous conversation, because when it comes to combating social injustices in America, it is not about being confrontational. It is about being conversational.
Welcome, everybody, to our Race to Social Justice podcast. I'm John Kepner. I'm the white guy.
And I am Kiva White. And as you can see, I am the Black guy. I've been this way for a very long time, and I don't think I'm going to change.
Kiva and I share a love of the letter K. K for Kiva, K for Kepner, and K for knowledge, what we try to impart in these broadcasts. It's what Kiva calls the K factor. The goal of our podcast is to promote racial and social justice and equity through honest and even sometimes difficult conversations, what we call courageous conversations. We've found that our conversations with each other have deepened our respective understandings of racism and our personal responsibilities in that regard. And that led us to invite guests to share their honest experiences and learnings. And we hope that these podcasts will help our listeners and maybe even our guests as we all continue on our respective journeys learning about these topics. So, Kiva, who's our guest today?
Well, John, today I have the wonderful pleasure of introducing Jessica Craft, affectionately known as Jess, great friend and great colleague. Jessica is the executive director and founder of Rock to the Future. And Rock to the Future offers free student-driven music programs for youth throughout the Philadelphia area. And they're really aimed at helping young people reach their highest potential in life. Jess is a Temple graduate, so am I, so go Owls. She holds a degree in business administration and economics. Jess has been featured in the New York Times. She has been named a local leader at the PA Conference for Women and received the Designing Leadership Award for the Arts and Business Council of Philadelphia. Her past volunteer work includes being a big sister through Big Brothers Big Sisters, working with Habitat for Humanities, volunteer drum instructor at Girls Rock Philly Youth and adult camps, and organizing community benefit events. And she's just a wonderful person, kind-spirited, and really embraces social justice and change for the better society. And so with that, I would want to introduce to our listeners and our viewers to Jess Craft. Welcome to the show.
Welcome, Jess.
Well, thank you for that introduction. That was very, very generous, very kind.
Very good. We're glad to have you. Glad to have you. So John, you want to kick us off?
I will. So Jess, we like to ask our guests right at the outset to go back to their origin, the origin story. Tell us about where you grew up and kind of lay the what about growing up and your parents and so forth that laid a foundation for what you're doing today?
Sure. So I grew up in Delaware County. It's, just outside of the city. Most of my childhood was in Upper Darby Township. When, I guess we were a lower income family. I don't think that's something that growing up I really recognized, but something, reflecting back on, because my mom was a stay-at-home mom with 3 children, and my dad, had overcome a lot and isn't a college graduate, but just had worked really hard to get to a position in banking. And we didn't really realize that there was a lack of things because our schools provided a lot of things that we had in the Upper Darby Township. They really valued extracurricular opportunities and arts programming. So I did have the chance to start learning music in 3rd grade at elementary school, which is quite young, on violin. And then clarinet and saxophone. And then I started in the drum line in middle school. I was in the drum line from middle school through high school. And it was just really wonderful, I guess, to have that opportunity and that access to learning music, even though, we wore a lot of like hand-me-down clothes. My mom cut my hair at home. So I think that other people might have thought that we were like a little bit, or that I also struggle from like ADHD. I'm diagnosed ADHD. So I think the term now is neurodivergent maybe for that. But so growing up, I think that maybe I was a little bit weird and struggled with some of those things and struggled with bullying. But music and that access to music through my public school system gave me a place to belong and a place to express myself.
So you're a drummer, right?
I am a drummer.
You play other instruments as well?
Well, yeah, I guess I mean, I can play guitar. I took banjo lessons for a couple of years, and you can see those behind me.
I see, yeah.
When we were growing up, my sisters they had the chance to play piano from a neighbor. And so we did have a piano in the household growing up, so I could play like a little bit of piano. I was always kind of ashamed growing up of my voice from peer pressure. So not until probably like my late 20s did I feel more confident to sing. But I guess I would say that I don't know that I could play any of the instruments great. But I think that that's also one of the beautiful things about music. I did drums. Drums are my strongest competency. But they're, with music, that is just like one of the amazing things is that it's all about having that chance to express yourself. And there's no like one right way to do something. And there's no like the best way or the wrong way to do something.
So do you play the full set or do you play like
Yeah, when I was growing up, it was the bass drum. So the one that does sit on you and you play like this. But then I also played snare drum that would sit here and, you play it like this. And the drum line was extremely competitive. So it was a very different, I think, type of musical experience than I'm hoping to bring to young people through our work with Rock to the Future. I think there was a lot of great things that came from that, like discipline and a lot of discipline, I guess. But when I went to Temple, that's when I really connected with like an external arts community. And that's the chance, I think, when people have that chance to start to explore themselves and meet other people that they're not just meeting because they're forced to be in a school classroom with them. And so that's when I started playing drum set in college, and I joined my first punk band, and and then I joined a indie folk band, and then like we kind of transitioned to indie pop. So yeah, I mean, I put out with my different bands maybe 5 or 6 albums, and we've toured a couple of times to South by Southwest and throughout the United States. And so, yes, I do play full drum set.
Nice.
Yeah.
So,
and I mean, to your point, though, it is like interesting because like it's not uncommon to be the only female at events performing. And it's really actually pretty amazing to see that there is like a huge shift now, I think, in more like representation in music.
Yeah.
We had a podcast several months ago with a Black musician by the name of whose stage name was Goldie Pipes.
Yeah.
And he talked about Black musician from the South, and he talked about the origin of music really being rooted in drumming and going back to Africa drumming. And it was quite interesting perspective that he brought to the table. So I can really appreciate drumming. Our producer is a drummer, as we talked about before. So what was it about the drums?
I think with the ADHD, which, I think just having something that was like that steady tempo or, feeling that beat was really soothing.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. It's weird to describe, I guess, like it just kind of, called to me more than other instruments, because I did play, I started on violin, I played clarinet and saxophone for a couple of years. And also, I guess, thinking back as like my teenage self, like all of the like cute boys were in the drum line.
There you go.
So there was a little incentive.
Right. Okay. That's good.
That too. But I guess it was just something about the drums. And also, growing up, I was maybe rebellious and kind of a difficult child and a difficult teenager. And just the drums seemed like more like rebellious than like another instrument. And, my parents, they didn't say you had to do music, but it was like, you have to do something.
Mm-hmm. Wow. That's awesome. I think it really connects with what I wanted to explore next in terms of, okay, so you started Rock to the Future back in 2010, a little over a decade or so ago. What led you, what was the driving force behind that, behind you, sitting down and saying, oh, wow, I need to form this organization? And how did just kind of like a two-part question, and how do you see music as a form of social justice for marginalized groups?
Yeah, I think for starting Rock to the Future, I think a lot of it was definitely pulled from like childhood experiences of having access to music, and that being a reason that I stayed in school. Like I remember saying to my parents in high school, like, I'm dropping out, and I always did well in school, but just really struggled with like the social aspect and the structure. And music is what kept me in school. So being in Philadelphia, and being in Big Brother, Big Sister, and, having my little sister, she was 12 when we first synced up, and seeing a lot of the difficulties that she had with just with poverty and trauma, and not having a space to have self-expression. And she loved music, but her schools never offered music. And we would go to Pennypack Park, and I gave her a guitar, and we would play guitar and we would sing, and she had a great voice, but just seeing that there wasn't that access and places after school for youth to be together in like a safe space, and knowing like how cool music is, like that's something that like teens gravitate towards. And so it seemed like just a really crucial need. And it was like, we can have these really cool music programs, they can be provided at no cost, and then we can also provide other services. So even from the start, it was music, no cost, original songwriting, student driven. And then we're also going to provide educational assistance.
So there's
your other question. Sorry. So for why the support, why is this crucial for social justice and specifically for marginalized communities? There's so many benefits to music, specifically around self-expression. And, when you're a teen, it's so crucial to have a form of positive self-expression. It's so crucial to have like a safe space that you can be with your friends, to be yourself, to find your unique identity, to have access to all of like the other benefits of music, like social emotional growth, like building confidence and communication skills and executive functioning skills, like time management, self-regulation. And for certain populations to have that access and to experience those benefits, but then knowing that when there isn't resources available or when there is disinvestment, then those are the types of programs that are not accessible. And that usually is impacting poor neighborhoods, which are generally Black and Latino families in Philadelphia.
Wow.
So it opens so many questions I have. I love the name Rock to the Future. How did you come up with the name, and what's behind that?
Yeah, I'm like still like, well, it's interesting, like the evolution of the name and how that impacts people's perception of what we do at Rock to the Future. Because when starting Rock to the Future was very much like rock, like awesome, like you rock, we rock, we're awesome, you're awesome. And then the pun of like, of course, rock is a style of music. And then so thinking about like how our these skills that we're learning while we're being like all awesome together and making music. And that's leading us to a space where we can have a brighter future. And I would say one of the largest questions that we get is like, oh, do you only teach rock music? And then one of the other questions that we get, which I also think is really interesting, is, well, do urban youth want to learn rock music? So, which is, those are the two questions that we get the most frequent. And so it's a little bit of, I guess, of a marketing thing that we are working on with trying to better explain, I guess, what we are all about, because when youth come through the door, we are providing them with the foundation through popular music, but they're picking the artists that we're teaching. So like this past week, like students were working on a Rihanna song from the Wakanda soundtrack. Or they also picked, a different class picked Smash Mouth's All Star from like the 90s or so. So the music styles are like all over the place, but it's really like picked by the kids. And then they're using these foundations that they're learning to then create their own music. And they create things that are, rock, pop, hip hop, rap, even like weird, like experimental noise stuff. So we do, I think, experience maybe some barriers from the name Rock to the Future that over 12 years, if I could go back 12 years and change the name to something different, I'm not sure. Maybe we would do that.
When you talk to people that look like me who live in the suburbs about what you do you encounter people think, well, these kids just, they must love rap and, black music, as opposed to the child that wants to learn the violin or classical music or other genres of music? Do you see that inherent kind of bias in questions you get and that sort of thing?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that's why the question of, do these kids want to learn rock music? And I mean, to be
right, that's what,
and we do have a extremely diverse group of students. And when we first started Rock to the Future, we were primarily serving the Kensington Fishtown area, which is mostly Latino and white students. And as the program grew and people were reaching out to us from all over the city. And so then we were expanding into other neighborhoods. And the demographic that we were serving changed. And now, we have 15 locations throughout the city. And a majority of our students are Black. And the second largest demographic that we serve would be Latino students, and then white students after that. But it is interesting, like the perception of what students want to learn based off of their racial identity and perceived background. So we have a lot, and it's just really interesting, that barrier and that question, because everybody is their own like unique individual. And so when the kids come through the door, there's no preconceived notion of what we expect them to create or what we believe that they're capable of creating, or what, again, it's really about equipping them with the opportunity, the access, and the tools, so that way they can take their creations in whatever direction they want to take them.
Well, I could kind of confirm that kind of the notion that kids of color are able to learn different genres of music, because I had the opportunity to attend Rock to the Future puts on a music ball, a music for all. And I'm telling you, I was blown away by the entertainment. So all the students perform. They have a headliner, a performer, but I had more fun dancing and clapping to the students. And it's this one young lady, she sung the song, "It Was Born on a River." Change is gonna come.
I was born by the river in a little town, and just like the river, baby, I've been running ever since.
the crowd just went nuts, including myself and my wife, because you wouldn't expect, like you said, the perception is that she would probably sing hip hop or a Beyonce song. But this young lady stole the show, and the music ball for all, it was a great event, a great experience for me. And can you share a little bit about this project and how it supports your mission at Rock to the Future? Give a little bit about what it is and
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm so glad that you could join us last year, because I feel like one of the things about our organization is like, until you come into this space or come to an event, and I know you've had the chance to come in and do some really cool workshops with the students this year, but
yeah,
it's one thing to talk about what we do, or to read it on our website or in the grant application or something. But I think when people really come into this space or come to an event is when they can really feel the vibe of what the organization is all about. So our Music for All Ball is scheduled for this year for April 29th. I'm not sure if this will air before that or not. So I guess we'll see. But so this event has been happening since, I think, 2014, and it's certainly grown over the past many years of doing this. And, it used to be like a really kind of boring, lots of speakers and stuff like that kind of event. And so we've transitioned this over the past couple of years to be super exciting, featuring collaborations between our students and popular Philadelphia musicians. This year we have Shub Daniels performing with the students. One of our board members, Natasha Felder, who is a trained opera singer. And then we have the Bacon Brothers. Also, we're still securing our MC and our DJ and some other performers, because tickets will go on sale in like 2 weeks or so from now. But it raises money to keep our programs free. The programs are free, and we provide, all of the resources and supplies that are needed to run our operations. And the students don't have to bring anything with them. They don't need anything. They can just come and we even provide meals and transportation. And the way that we can keep our programs free is by hosting events like the Music for All Ball. This year also specifically, we're raising funds to support our anti-violence programs. So that's including, we're going to be quadrupling the number of programs that we have at the Juvenile Justice Service Center. And we also just started last week a program with intervention prevention services. And there's just a lot of demand for our programs, and the greatest barrier to participation is distance. So really thinking about like what other places can we have our locations, so that way we're removing that barrier.
So your programs include vocal arts as well as instrumental?
Yeah. So
Yeah.
we teach guitar, bass, drums, piano, choral ensemble, songwriting, music production. And then there's also other creative things like graphic design, where students are learning graphic design to make their own band posters and affirmation posters.
Oh, interesting.
Marketing materials. So there's a lot of opportunity for youth to find what is the thing that they are the most drawn to.
Mm-hmm. I'm really curious about a couple of things, and one is, how do you measure impact? How do you know that your programs are working? That social emotional learning is happening? And can you tell us some stories of success stories, and some stories where you couldn't succeed?
Sure. Okay. One of the things that we've been really intentional about is using music as a bridge to provide other services. So music is what brings young people through the door, and then we are also providing support with high school graduation. Particularly this year, there's new graduation requirements, so we've had to step up our game a little bit in that space. College and trade school support. We even provide, when youth graduate, like a scholarship. We have a new partnership with a foundation that pays for trade school certification programs. We support like financial aid processes. We start with our middle school students within, career exposure. We have paid work and internship opportunities. And then this year, we also have on staff, we just hired a youth engagement coordinator with a social work background who is connecting families and youth with other resources like food, housing, physical and mental health. So when we're looking at impact, which is also an interesting question when people are like, how do you measure impact? Because it's like, well, we can see the students show up every day. They have a great time. We have dozens of performances every year that hundreds of like excited family members come out to, and you can just see it in action and you can see how impactful it is. But if we're talking about the numbers, then, 100% of the students from our after school program go on to college or trade school, which is really incredible compared to, for example, the host school that we operate out of has around a 60% graduation rate, and 25% of students like pursue post-secondary education. When we're looking at like social emotional skills, we do surveying. So we have a survey at the beginning of the year, at the end of the year. And we do try to be really careful though about how can we do these things that are required to measure impact that we need to secure funding, because again, our programs are free, but how are we not over assessing because we don't want our students to feel like they're being monitored or assessed constantly. And that totally, ruins the vibe of the programs. We also track, academic progress, but we do this in the sense of using that as a way to support youth. So does that mean like, if a student's not doing well in school, is that because like they don't have food at home? Is that because they are having, mental health issues? Or is it because they don't understand the subject? And so then that's where we can step in with like our Ready for the Future coordinator, our youth engagement coordinator, and provide like some of those other resources that may be needed to support long-term success, which is graduating from high school, pursuing professional pathways, improving mental health, and just being able to live a life of fulfillment and dignity. We do also have other maybe lighter touch programs, that we are providing weekly music classes in schools or after schools or at partner locations. And so in those cases for impact, that's through the testimonials from the students. So like for your question of like a story, tell me a success story. We had a student that started a program, and within 4 weeks, his mom was reaching out to us saying, my son has had behavioral issues for the past as long as I can remember. And ever since starting your weekly guitar program, they're almost gone. And that is like really incredible, because I don't even know if that's something that we would have expected to happen. But to know that parents are seeing that change, we have young people that they say that like having that opportunity to play guitar, it allows them to express themselves. They can't express themselves well with words. And it's really, using phrases like, this has saved my life. This has gotten me on track. I didn't know what I was going to do with myself after high school. I didn't know what I wanted to do in the future. And now you've really made me think about what I want to do and are helping me to lay the plan for that.
As I hear you talk about the program Design and the Impact, it brings me to the social determinants of health. And so in the healthcare arena, it says, what are some things that determines whether or not a person achieves optimal health outcomes? And it's health, but it's not just wedded to physical health or somatic health. It also can include mental health, right? And so hearing you talk about the things that you all are doing at Rock to the Future, it's really seeking, and I'm not sure if you're aware of this, seeking to combat the social determinants of health, which is really looking at how do you eradicate two specific pillars, accessibility and affordability. How do you make sure folks have access to quality care and make sure that it's affordable? And you all are doing that. Like whenever you embed services where students are, that removes the transportation barrier right there. The programs are free, so there's the affordability or the cost factor is eliminated. And they say when you do that, when you make programs accessible and more affordable, you improve healthcare outcomes, you eliminate the transportation barriers, and all of those things lead to not, in my opinion, not just good somatic or physical health, when you have access to a doctor, but it also, in the case of what you all are doing by offering these students quality music programs. And I've seen it because I had the opportunity to meet some of your students, and it's just amazing how well disciplined they are. And again, kudos to your staff as well, too, Jess, because they are fabulous. They're 100% committed to seeing these young people excel in life. But I just wanted to add that about those social determinants of health, because I can hear some of you doing some of the work to eradicate the systemic barriers to achieving, both mental and physical health. So I just wanted to put that out there.
You talked in your origin story about the public school offering you music, which was really critical to you getting to school and what you're doing now. Mm-hmm. So could you talk about the schools now and what, if any, relationship you have with the schools? Do you have after school programs? And then secondly, you also referenced earlier violence. Mm-hmm. And for those, even for people that live in the Philadelphia area, but for our listeners who don't live in the Philadelphia area, the violence issue, anti-violence issue is a huge issue. And could you talk about how what these kids are experiencing there and how your programs are helping with that and the funding for that sort of thing? Two questions there wrapped in one, but they are kind of interrelated.
I wrote them down, so so I should. Yeah, all of our programs are partner based, so that's one of the things that gives us like a couple of different crucial benefits. Like we can keep our expenses down, so that way the funding that we're receiving is really allowing us to build really high quality programs without taking off over the cost of like maintaining facilities. And so we are working directly with school partners, community organizations, and then the Juvenile Justice Service Center. So we don't own any of our own spaces. We're going right to other places. And the other thing that's really amazing about that is then that it gives us access to young people, and to it provides like legitimacy in the spaces that we're working in, and community trust, and that ability to engage youth and partners and community members directly in spaces that already exist. The Philadelphia School District is in such a tough situation because there have just been decades of disinvestment, and what the schools really need, and the way that the funding is distributed in the state of Pennsylvania is not adequate for what the youth need in Philadelphia. And that has to do with how taxes in wealthy areas can support the school systems, and how Philadelphia doesn't have that same type of income to support the school systems, because there's not the level of wealth and there's not the level of property taxes that are in other areas. So, I don't know what the exact numbers are, but I would imagine that it's something like maybe $20,000 a year is spent on a student in a wealthy suburb, and in Philadelphia, maybe it's like $12,000 a year or less than that or so. And then when you're pairing that with the disinvestment that is happening in the communities that the schools are located in, where there's not access to other resources like after school programming or employment, or even like transportation. I mean, like the Philadelphia transportation system is really tough. So there's so many reasons that I think people overlook as to why the school system appears to be failing young people. And, even with these new Act 158 graduation requirements that they're putting in this year, which requires seniors to pass the Keystone exam. And if they don't do that, then they have to hit other things in order to graduate. And what we're receiving from feedback from our students is that they're just not really receiving the support that they need within their schools, because the schools don't have adequate staffing and resources to be able to do that. And it's kind of this like really awful cycle, because there's no resources. The schools are overcrowded. The teachers are frustrated because there's no supplies and their classrooms are so big. And so then people are exiting education. And then that means there's a teacher shortage. So then it makes the classes larger and it makes it more difficult to get people in. So I don't know what the solution is. I mean, it's a massive systemic issue, and our relationship with the schools, on the other hand, to transition, we have a great relationship with the schools that we work in, with the school district administrative office. We have learned to operate fairly independently within our lot of relationships in the school, because we don't want to be a burden to them with all of the other things that they have going on. We want to come in, we want to beautify spaces. And, the space we have in Kensington High School was filled with most junk, garbage. I don't know. We come in, we bring our team in, we clean out these spaces, we put up murals with the students, we decorate them. And now we have beautiful spaces that we can use in areas of the schools that were previously filled with old materials. So I know that they really appreciate the work of Rock to the Future. And there's a lot of other nonprofit organizations in the city that are working to support the school district of Philadelphia. But unless there's something at the state level, which is so challenging because of the political system and political parties in Pennsylvania, then it's not something that nonprofit organizations can solve, or that the school district is going to be able to solve on their own without massive changes. So for the violence issue, I mean, it kind of, I think, ties into a lot of the similar stuff, is where, when you have decades of disinvestment in communities, and then schools that are overcrowded, don't provide support, are experiencing violence in the school day, where there's just not resources, then people lose that vision of what can I do, or what is a better road for me? How can I live a life of fulfillment? I don't even have access to the things I need now. And many young people don't realize the different pathways that are available, or that, like, the community college for most Philadelphia students is free. But there are some barriers where you have to be able to test into college level classes, which many students can't do, or some students can't do, and they may have to be in like remedial programs. So I think with the violence issue that we're seeing, and there was and it's not just in Philadelphia, it's, nationwide. And I think that there's a lot of discussion around, gun laws and some of those more political things. But when we are looking at Philadelphia, the neighborhoods that are experiencing, if you laid the map of gun violence over the map of poverty, they are the same neighborhoods. So, I mean, we're seeing more violence because there has been disinvestment, and now everybody's kind of like rushing to try to like fill these gaps. And it's like, do we have short-term solutions? Do we have long-term solutions? It's, in some respects, it's like throwing tape at a wall and trying to figure out like what's going to work. The city released like a couple of weeks ago, just some real struggles at like the city level with the Office of Violence Prevention, and whether or not they're effective, and some of the struggles that they're challenging with staffing issues. So it is really tough. So I guess the way that we're approaching violence prevention, because you have all of these, and then the school system's not having funding, you have all of these massive issues, and we, as a nonprofit organization, don't have the ability. We can advocate, but we don't really have the ability on like a large scale with what we're doing. So we really focus on like, what can we do within our realm. That includes providing more access, so opening up more locations, specifically targeting areas that lack, where youth lack access to music programs and after school programming, really focusing on out of school time programs versus like in school programs for our expansion. So that way we're looking at safe spaces after school or during the summer. Incorporating into our existing and our new programs opportunities to directly learn about violence prevention and bringing in restorative practices and conflict resolution mediators. And then the partners that we're working with also, so looking at the partnership with the Juvenile Justice Service Center, where we're serving incarcerated youth, and the partnerships that we're building with the intervention services. We're going to be bringing on our anti-violence coordinator within the next month. And so one of our goals is really to strengthen the ecosystem. So that way, when young people are coming out of incarceration or intervention, that we're able to bring them into one of our community-based locations to continue to provide those resources and support to, provide a positive space, self-expression, college and trade school support, and, mental health resources.
Huge.
Yeah. I like your thinking around, you have them there, you have a captive audience. So why don't we, there's a wraparound model that I see taking place, and that, the Milwaukee wraparound model is being used in mental health, where you get kids into the care management organizations here in New Jersey, and I think they're called COOAs in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and you kind of get them in this one shot, and then you bring all of these services and wrap around the kids while you have them. And so I think that's an excellent model. And I was going to ask about tutoring services, but you mentioned that you do offer some academic supports.
I think one of the things that we've really shifted away from, also from when we first started, and I would say that this is probably from my background, because when I was growing up, my parents, it was very much like college, you and your sisters, college. And a lot of that had to do with their backgrounds, because when they were growing up, they grew up in extreme poverty and in households with a lot of addiction and didn't have access and really had to work hard to get to college or trade programs. So when I was starting Rock to the Future, it was like, okay, everybody goes to college. But that's not the best approach. And, as you grow and you learn, and I'm also as you guys, a knowledge seeker and continual, learner. So we've really kind of shifted the conversation that we're having around, like, what does success look like, and what does post-high school look like for people? And it doesn't have to be college. It could be a trade program, apprenticeship program. And so that's why we've also started to build relationships with, a funder, for example, that is paying for trade school certifications for youth. So, like, if they can or don't desire to go to the community college or another college program, that's not for everybody, that now there's other pathways that we're able to support.
So could you talk a little bit about scale? I mean, you're a lot of different locations. How many employees you have? How do you, and in that regard, your employees and your board, racial social equity are important issues there in terms of the complexion of your staff and the board. What are you doing in that arena so that you're responsive to the people that you're serving?
Okay, so the question, was there a first question before that one? I think you said scaling.
I think for our listeners, getting an idea of the scope of what you're doing in terms of size of the organization, number of employees, that sort of thing. But then how are you, if at all, responding to racial and social equity in terms of your staff and your board?
Absolutely. So, when we started, it was 13 students, and it was volunteer run, and it was like such a loose concept of, let's provide music and educational support and let's just see what happens. And it has taken a long time, 12 years now, to get to this place where we feel like we have a really fantastic program model. and have spent a lot of time just learning and listening and working with partners and with our youth to improve to where Rock to the Future is now. And we have scaled from, our Kensington location went from 13, now it has 40 students with a waiting list, because 40 is what we have decided is what our cap is going to be. And so with being able to open up other locations, we have right now 15 locations in Philadelphia, either in school or after school, probably about split evenly. Our team, I think we have 10 full-time now, 7 part-time. Our budget is going to be around $1 million this year. So it's really kind of amazing to go from volunteer-based, not really having any resources, and some at 1 year just being like, I don't know if we're gonna have the money to operate next year, to being in this place where like we have infrastructure and we have this ability now that when we are getting new funding, we have the staff in place to be able to bring on new locations, and we have that ability to be responsive to the needs of the community, like with bringing on the person with a counseling background to be able to provide more resources. Like that was in response to a lot of the challenges that our youth are facing because of COVID-19. As we've grown, because I am white, and when we started in Fishtown, I mean, my husband works with me, Josh. So my background's business. Josh is a music guy. I was doing the business stuff. Josh was teaching the music. We had a couple of friends who were also volunteering, teaching music things. And as we were growing and the demographic that we were serving was changing, and the neighborhoods that we were serving were just serving more neighborhoods, we definitely realized that there was like a need to racially diversify our team members, because you can see the difference. I love working with the kids. The kids love me when I come into the sites now, but when I come into the site versus like when I come into the site with like a young Black male artist, you can just see the vibe and how there is a different connection with people that look similar to the students that we serve. So we have been intentional about hiring. And so that means like focusing on hiring from Philadelphia, but also specifically within the neighborhoods that we work. And there has been just an incredible improvement in our ability to connect with our communities and in the service that we're providing. And I think in the enjoyment of these students in the program, because there are people that work with us that they may be able to relate to in a different way. I think that when people are doing this, when organizations are doing this, it's important to like reach outside of your own circle in order to bring new people into your spaces, because a lot of people tend to hang out with or know people that look similar to them. And so if I was, in my early 20s, if I were just bringing on team members from my personal circle, then my personal circle is very white. And so building relationships, being intentional about recruitment, and also thinking about the hiring timeline and building all of these things has really what has allowed us to, and paying fair wages. Also, I would say, so increasing our compensation packages, increasing the professional development that we can provide and can pay for folks, has just really led to us having like a more diverse staff, and has really improved like the way that the organization operates. With the board, it's an interesting conversation, because I think that that's a space that we're still working on. Again, when we did start the organization, like the board was all white. And at this point, we do have more than half of the board would identify as a person of color. But I think now we're getting into the complexities around, I guess I would say, not all persons of color are the same race and culture. So, which I'm not sure if that's the best way to say it. I guess I think that now there's been this, like, in the nonprofit space, a huge, everybody's like, oh, we've got to diversify our boards. And I think that word diversity has lost a lot of meaning of what it originally was. And when people are saying we have to diversify our boards, I think what people are really meaning is we need more Black or Latino board members. And for whatever reason, I think people are still really uncomfortable maybe with having that conversation about what do words mean and what words can we say without making other people feel uncomfortable. It's something that's really hard.
Yeah. I'm on 3 governance committees, and we're dealing with all of those issues. Mm-hmm. And I've come to the belief that diversity is an asset. So if you can define what that asset that you're looking for, different people bring different things to the table in terms of their expertise and those sorts of things. You need those things on your board, but just being a person of color is the starting point. But what does that person bring to the table that's going to enhance your board work? Is it because they live in the community, or they've been a parent and their child has seen the benefit of it? Or is it because they're connected to resources for funding? I mean, it's not just a high level, one thing. You got to go deeper and look at the asset that the person brings. And I think what you said earlier about getting into other networks than your own networks is absolutely key.
I think we've been focused. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Kiva.
I was going to agree with John. I think it has to be strategy, in addition to it being intentional, but it has to be an intentional strategy with some underlying, some form of business objective in terms of moving the work forward to make sure that you're reaching a more diversified, population of people that you want to serve. In my experience, I've been asked to come on boards. I have so many stories I could tell, and it was just because I was a person of color, not really triaging what I can bring to the table and how I fit in with the business objective. Is just to put a check mark on, we have diversified boards because we have people of color, and there's really no meaning and mechanism towards that process. And I think that's when you can start having some challenges with the board composition if it's being driven just solely by getting people of color on our board, or using your words, just we need to diversify the board.
We've really been focusing, I guess, on a board that is representative and reflective of the community that we serve. Because also diversity for different organizations and reflection and representation for the community that they serve is going to be different depending on the organization. Mm-hmm. And so with Rock to the Future, we have this past year brought on like our first alumni student onto the board of directors. We brought our first parent of a student onto the board of directors.
There it is.
But for me, that's not enough representation from the communities we serve, because I believe that in the traditional nonprofit structure of board governance, the board is supposed to, have the final kind of decision-making power. And so if that is the case in an organization, then shouldn't the people that are being impacted by those decisions have the primary seat at the table for the way that those decisions are being made? And I think some of the conversation that I've heard, not necessarily within our organization, but within nonprofit spaces, do people in communities that are impacted by poverty, are there people that have professional skills that can be used on boards? And so there's a lot of these microaggressions or, outright racism that you'll hear in conversation. And it is just a really challenging space, I think, because there's different levels of education or willingness to participate in conversation. And we never want anybody to feel tokenized, whether that be, a Black, Latino, Asian person, or a female, or somebody from the LGBTQ community. So any of these communities that I guess are marginalized, then how when people are either coming onto our team or onto our board or being a part of the organization in a different way, how can we build a space that is really inclusive, that is bringing everybody to the table and everybody's voice counts, so that way we're able to build a stronger organization.
Yeah, it's interesting you say with parents and people that live in a community, we're looking at one aspect of their being, the economics, and whether or not they can write a check or contribute in that respect or their educational level. But I think about this whole concept of system navigators. In the mental health field, they have parents as navigators. In the child welfare system, they have parents as what they call system navigators, because they've been involved in these systems and they have knowledge and information about how to move through those systems successfully. And so when I think about the work that you all doing in the different communities that you're going in, it's great to have people on boards that live in those communities, because they can help you navigate through the various components of those communities, where you should set up at, where you should set your programs up and where you should not set your programs up. You can get, direct information from the parents, as well as what we call community brokers, so to speak. Like, these folks they have insight, and they can be the liaison between your organization and the community to, buy into what it is that you're trying to do in their backyard. So I do see value in having families on board, regardless of their economic status. But I can see how, traditional boards would look for a specific profile of a board of director.
It's hard because I think it's battling against, like, what is that traditional expectation or role of a nonprofit board. And again, really, like, the board, being at the top, and then I guess the executive director, and then the staff, and then then we're serving like the constituents at the bottom. And like, how are we really changing that so that way the constituents and the people that are served are really part of that decision-making process at the top, and the board is in partnership with the executive director, and the executive director is in partnership with the team. So that way it's not like this top-down model. And that's something I think that Rock to the Future has been successful with, and is something that we're still working on, because, it's, I think it's something that a lot of nonprofit organizations are continuing to work on around these traditional systems.
Yeah. And then the other factor, which is huge, for nonprofits, and yours in particular, since your programs are free, is what are your funders' expectations? And they have changed dramatically. I've just been working on a number of grants, and the questions are deep questions about your policies, your demographics you're serving, and all that sort of stuff. And that's a huge trend, and you have to really be responsive to that sort of thing, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a really interesting conversation, because that is something that we're talking about with our nominations and governance committee. And I sit on a couple of funding peer review panels, and I do a lot of the grant writing for our organization. So I see that, and putting people, the expectation of putting people into boxes, or having to say this number of people are this and this number of people are that, or whatever, is, I guess, required, but is really weird. And I'm not sure. I feel like I'm still processing how that is. It is great. I think that funders are including questions on their applications now around, how are you pursuing racial and social justice? And that they're recognizing that, historically funding has not been used in the best way, and that there is a need to support organizations that are pursuing social and racial justice and that are centering that. But then when you're getting into the discussion around like tokenization and are people just bringing people on in order to check these boxes of like, yes, we have like one LGBT person and we have one woman and we have one, Black person and one Latino person, then I think that we're getting into a space where people are filling things for filling the boxes possibly. But for our organization, because we do serve primarily Black and Latino families, like it's important to me that those specific racial and cultural identities are represented on our board of directors and on our team, because I think that that is a lived experience that people have in the communities that we serve, and that is a valuable experience that valuable experience and perspective that can help guide our decision making at the board level. That may not be true for every nonprofit organization, but for our organization specifically, because of who we serve, it's important that we have people on the board that would identify as being impacted by poverty and that have similar lived experiences as the families that we serve.
Yeah, I think that's where, when you have that, that's where you have an empathic viewpoint of operating your programs or services when your board is comprised of how you just described it, Jess. And it's not, in my experience working with nonprofits, both as an employee and as a consultant, a lot of the work is what I call performative and parentified when it comes to working with vulnerable populations. And so, and most of the people on the board don't have lived experiences as the people that are being served. And that's where it can get into, too much parentification, and we know what's right and we know what's best for these people. Right. Yeah. And that's not a social justice, a good social justice best practice. There's a saying, nothing about us without us. And that clause, that phrase really says that if you're serving people in the public sphere, you should have their input and voice should count in terms of how you plan to deliver services and programs. So I like the fact that you all are working to diversify the board, not just from a racial standpoint, but from all of the social identities and the social makeups in our society, and particularly in the communities that you serve. That's awesome.
I'm working now towards getting current students onto our board, which they're not allowed to be voting members like per state laws, actually. Some states allow minors to be voting members on boards. Pennsylvania is not one of them. But that is a space now that I don't think I have buy-in from everybody quite yet, but I'm working on, education. And I think that could be considered like kind of like a radical idea. Like, how can we allow these young people, like, they don't know what they're doing. They're so inexperienced. Like, why should they be able to like have an opportunity to be part of decision-making or something? And that is just so ludicrous to me, because that's a huge opportunity and I mean, young people are so full of wisdom and things that like older people don't even understand. Like, I learned
we see things we don't see.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And
I think that would be awesome. I mean, maybe get if you can't get them on the board and slow walk it, slow prime your board, maybe develop a student advisory council and, have their voice heard that way. Are you familiar with Hart's Ladder of Youth Participation?
No, I'm not. Hart's Ladder?
Hart's, yeah, HARTS, Hart's Ladder. I think that would be a helpful tool to work with your board to get them to kind of be more embracing on having a youth participate, because you use the word partner, and Hart's Ladder takes you up the ladder of how adults typically view you, and on the higher rung, it's all about partnership. And on the lower rung is tokenism, and it describes how each of those viewpoints are operationalized from an adult standpoint.
Oh, I appreciate that. I also wrote down parentification, because I've heard that term before, but it's usually in the sense of like a parent is having their maybe like teen child taking care of younger siblings or so, but I hadn't heard it in the way that you talked about it, where you said people making decisions for other people, thinking that they don't know how to make decisions for themselves.
Yeah, like teachers are like I go pick up my girls. I'm the parent. Your job is to educate. You don't need to tell and it's all unjust. But once the parent comes on site, the pseudo parental role now it's changed. It hands over. We take care of the coats and putting on and so you're standing there right there, and they said, "Oh, put your coat on. Make sure you button up. Don't leave this. Don't leave." And the parents standing, which the parents are standing right there. So that's a subtle example of parentification.
Well, yeah, and this stuff, I mean, even like talking about this in like a public space where like these are usually the kinds of conversations that I'm like, I really have super amazing staff members that challenge me, and we have pretty open conversations about race and sexuality and I don't know, just all kinds of things. With my board, definitely have a great relationship with the board members and the board chair, but to be in like a public space like this, talking about some of these challenges and these struggles, like even just like thinking about this, I'm like, am I going to listen to this later? Like, am I saying things that are like of people? Am I saying things wrong? And I think that is a fear of people when they're having these conversations. That's like, my God, is a funder going to hear this and not want to give us funding? Am I describing things wrong? Am I, I don't know.
Well, I can put you at ease. I think you've been great. You've been very inspiring, and it's been a great learning. And you show a really great degree of sensitivity to all these issues as you speak. So I would not worry about that at all.
Yeah.
But we're well past. I want to ask you one final question, and that is, who is your most inspiring musician role model?
Oh my gosh, musician role model. I'm going to be totally honest with you, because I know I started this music organization, but I am really terrible with music. I mean, just in general, I listen to the same like 20 albums over and over, and it's like the Hamilton soundtrack, Whitney Houston, Mariah Carey, and then like emo songs like Taking Back Sunday and Saves the Day and Dashboard Confessional and like the Foo Fighters. So it's all over the place. And I don't really stay in touch with like music in that way. So I am going to answer the question differently.
Right.
And I will say, because I think this also could be a great resource for other folks that are listening. But I think that one of the things that has really supported my evolution and in social and racial justice, because I would say even maybe 5 years ago, like I didn't really know what the term social justice meant. Like we were kind of doing that with Rock to the Future, but I had never really put that phrase on it. But Vu Lee from Nonprofit AF, he has a blog. I've seen him speak at conferences before. He's very active on LinkedIn. He has been an incredible resource for learning more about racial and social justice and really challenging the traditional systems that are set up in the nonprofit sector. So I appreciate the connection to music, but I really am pretty terrible with knowing music things.
Fair enough. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, this was great, Jess. Thank you so much for agreeing to sit with us and sharing your stories and learning, and the work that you do at Rock to the Future. What an awesome organization, and just moving the needle along, another step, another mile. We're running this race of social justice, and glad that you are in it. It seems like you're in it to stay and you're in it to win it. So we appreciate you. And thank you to all of our listeners out there and all of our viewers for joining us again for another courageous conversation on our race to social justice. Please, if you're watching on YouTube, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Make sure you stay in tune with all future episodes here on the race to social justice. So thank you so much. Kiva White, John Kepner, signing off. Have a good day, everyone.
The Race to Social Justice podcast is produced, edited, and mixed at The Dream in Austin, Texas. Visit thedreamrecordingstudio.com for more info.